Are we ready? Hello, boyo alert. Climb aboard Noah's Ark. I'm the kangaroo in the dark room, planning how to kill all the whales with a harpoon, planning how to raise all the bills and the families who argue, driving around my house while the poor got a carpool. Last June, I killed a fucking elephant and turned it into a dark suit. Then I wore it once and burned it in the bathroom. Went out for lunch and wrote a load of fake news calling women cunts that should be underpaid and maybe even slaves, punched in the face for. Okay, people, this has gotten too. That's a dramatic song I wrote about testosterone earlier, and yeah, that's YouTube.
I'm very impressed you managed to remember that song about testosterone. Well done.
I know it off by heart, man. Like I could riff that whole thing out, but I think the overlords would have a word at me, and they might see this hate symbol that we have on the screen and be like, these guys are just they're trying to raise an army of extremist kangaroos to take over the world.
Yeah, so, fun fact: the actual picture you've got up is a photo of Carl Jung from 1987. he faked his death, and then there he is. He decided to become one with the archetype of the kangaroo boyo. And he's looking quite good for his age, man. He's like, what, 100 years old at this point?
Yeah, man. Like for anybody on the podcast, just go up to Google, type in Chad kangaroo or boyo kangaroo, or if you want, just type in boyo. This usually comes up anyway, and you'll get this kangaroo with like huge biceps, like a huge, just big frame. And this is essentially what we're going to talk about in this lecture. This lecture is the discussion of transformation, the archetype of transformation. So the problem with life is that you're born feeble and not that much like a Chad kangaroo, and you suffer. You pretty much, this is the religious premise, is that life is suffering, and what they're saying is that the solution to suffering is to somehow turn yourself into this. And it's difficult, but it's achievable. And we're here to tell you how to do it. This is the path of transformation. There is one place you will discover how to become a Chad kangaroo. And this is it. Like, how lucky are you? That's incredible. Like all of those other things, like Buddhism and Christianity and Judaism and Islam, they've all been like, oh, God and all this shit. This is it. This is the fundamental solution. We've figured out the last level, you know? This is they talk about transsexuality and everybody turning into one weird modern human. This is it. This is what we're pointing towards. This is the solution. This is level 10. Here we are.
I cannot stop staring at the veins that are pulsing out of his muscles. It's so intense.
Hey, James, stare at this. What you think of that, James? See the Irishman just scoring a try against... look at that. That's literally 27 English guys all grabbing on his crotch as well, which is so weird.
Yeah, if he's trying to score a try, I think you're trying too hard here, Stephanie.
Like, do you see the way they're all... Like, look at this guy's face. Like, look at that. Just utter... He's just got this... It's almost like it's delicious to him or something like that. And they're all grabbing for a very, very weird part of his body, you know what I mean? Like, it's sort of... It's like they're trying to do something to him. I guess it's just instinct for them, though. They don't even know what's going on. They just saw his rump and they were like, "This Chad kangaroo, I need to get some of him." So, but this here is an Irishman scoring a try against the English. I'm pretty sure Ireland defeat the English in rugby quite frequently. So, that's
well. Not only are you uncomfortable with the fact that you're Irish, which is understandable, because you're Irish, you're also uncomfortable in your own sexuality, where you think any kind of male performance, any kind of male body is homosexual. So that really speaks a lot about you. It really does. But as I've said before, we're here for you. You can heal. This is a safe place, a safe community. And I can see you trying to choke back the emotion behind your fake smile. It's adorable.
James, I'm just dodge all these ridiculous accusations and projections, Freudian projections, and let's go into the lecture and talk to the people about transformation, how you can transform from being a dweeb Englishman, a virgin Englishman, into a Chad kangaroo, Chad Gaelic kangaroo specifically, because kangaroos were originally from Ireland, as everyone knows.
I can't even respond to that. It's just so obscure.
like when the Irish were sent down to Australia because the English couldn't handle having them so close, they're like, we need to get these guys away because they're too Chad. They brought their dogs with them and they evolved into the kangaroos. That's how it works. That's fundamentally what went on.
Sweet Lord above. Sweet Jesus Christ.
It's like the kangaroo is the Ubermensch of the Irish dog. The Englishman is the Untermensch of the Irish dog. That's there you go. Evolution 101.
Your
You're a
mind is
biologist.
so fractured and broken that you've in you trying to find wholeness in your weird, weak little life, you've joined onto this you're clinging onto the image of the kangaroo as if Christ has fallen off, and you're like, I need a God to come back. And then you see some weird aspect of masculinity, and you're like, that's where it needs to stand. But really, in your mind, what is there is the Englishman. We know this from your psychology right now. It's the English that sit there, and you're trying to dethrone them. But which is cute. It's why I'm not going to laugh at you. I have compassion for you. Honestly, it's just I'm sorry that you exist in your weird Irish pathetic form.
I think, all right, I'm gonna try steer this serious because I will spiral and it will get absolutely ridiculous. So hello people, boyo alert. I must say that I'm here with let's see what we have today. We have Dutch soy merchant Jap Dalmas. So here we go. How are you, Jap Dalmas?
I'm obscenely good. I'm going to change my name actually, because that's rude and that's called defamation. And I will take you to court over this. It's also slightly racist calling me a Jap. But I was reading the Gospel of Mark this week.
Jap is a Dutch name, overlords. YouTube. Jap is a Dutch name. Fear not, I am not being racist towards the ethno-state, which is Japan. Jap is a Dutch name, and he is in this specific Jap here, which is his first name, not a category, not a slander, is selling soy. So he's a very rich man, and actually I admire him quite a lot. A rich Dutch, East Indies British soy merchant.
This is someone needs to turn, I think, the boyo mythology, which is just retarded. I can't use that word. Sorry, silly, wrong, weird, into some kind of weird comic book, because it's just absolutely obscene at this point. Absolutely obscene. I'm going to change my name into when Jesus, he brought all his disciples up onto a mountaintop and he was renaming them. He renamed James and he gave him the surname the Son of Thunder. So I'm not the soy merchant Jack McGee or whatever it is. I'm going to be James the Son of Thunder, because Jesus the Chad alpha male decided that was my name.
James the Son of Thunder is fucking class, man. That is brilliant.
It sounds Celtic in a way. Sounds like one of the Norse gods, I guess. Son of Thor.
Yeah, it does. It sounds,
at the same time.
Sounds sort of pagan. Let's check out the chat to see who's with us, and we'll say a few of those. Fig Koyuk says good morning. That sounds like a Scandinavian name. Hello. Joshua Boardman says morning. How are you doing, chaps? Doom Honey says morning. I said how are you, and they were all asking where you were, and I said James accidentally nutted on his dog and has to clean him. That's why we're late. And Jake Keane said good evening. James, where did you get that shirt?
Oh yes, this is a beautiful shirt. If you want to buy this shirt, you can. If you check out Coach Joe 89 at Coach Joe 89 on Twitter. I'm not affiliated, to be honest with you. I could be, because he's a friend of mine.
He's a soy merchant, people. Be aware.
It's actually a really nice shirt. He sent it to me for free. So he's a very good chap. Beautiful shirt.
Zabis says there's the shirt, people. Zabis says when you complete the individuation process, you transform into a Chad kangaroo. It's fucking right, man. Like on the money. Like look, book finished, people. We can all retire now. Like it's done. Doom Honey. James made one of his colonies make it for Cod Wars. The Cod Wars are here. Kangaroo is tasty. Someone has eaten a kangaroo. He must be the Uber Chad here. Whoever's eating the kangaroo, like that's like the top of the food chain. Carl Jung Depth.
All the possible animals that are around, why would you eat a kangaroo out of all of them? It's like, to be honest, if I could choose one, this is completely irrelevant. I don't care. I get to do whatever the hell I want. I would eat a seal or a walrus, because they're not people. They're cute. Like they are literally a walking flippery ball of fat. I would take one of them alive. I would just put it on the barbecue, close the lid down, let it cook, get myself a nice baby seal. Not kangaroo. It's just weird.
Look, like it's a symbol. It's saying that it's like eating a lion. It's like I'm king of the jungle type thing, you know. Like, you know, it's just this. Hello, Skip is here. Hello, Skip. What's going on, Skip? I haven't seen you in a while, Skip. There's hope all is well. There's been a few people who've been telling me to send me messages saying they're really enjoying your stuff. Yes, like Doom Honey just below you says like your content. That's exactly it, Skip. So I hope all is going well over there on the far side.
I agree. I also like you too, Skip.
And James says hello. He says he loves you. Magenta, hiya. How you doing, Magenta? How is life? What's going on? Have you seen BTS new album Map of the Soul? But we have not. Number one, that's crazy. Map of the Soul and Soul Persona. Are we going into the individuation process? I guess, guys, we're going to have to bounce into it then, are we? Bruce Furlong. Hey, don't eat my mother. What? What?
Son of a kangaroo here. Jesus. That fits in the archetype mythology as well. It's like Mary was actually a kangaroo. That's why we know nothing about her. They had to cut out all the kangaroo information because it's too subversive.
We are all going to transform today into kangaroos. Guys, this is pretty much it. This is the revolution now. We're all going to form the caliphate today by transforming into kangaroos. I guess this is a good time to get into it because James did slander me earlier by saying that inside the soul of my psyche is an attempt to reach my apotheosis, which is an Englishman, which you got incorrect. My apotheosis is, in fact, a Chad kangaroo, which is the dominator of all Englishmen. It's the reason why the British are so afraid of going down into Australia. It's pretty much the reason why the British Empire collapsed. It's because they're like, man, if these guys make their way up into India, we're fucked. So that was pretty much it. But nonetheless, let's talk serious. We'll talk about the architecture of the mind. And I made a video this week that was talking about the concept of the Messiah, the position that is held in your mind of the Redeemer, and this is a very complex and deep archetype. We're calling it the self in this, but I'm trying to use new metaphors to make this easier to understand. If you've got that seat in the center of your psyche, which you use to premise all ideas of your identity on, you have in there this notion of a savior. Like, who should I be? It's that question of what would Jesus do? Who should I be? What's the best version of myself? Jesus is supposed to be this image for the Europeans for the last 2,000 years of the best man you could be, the best life you could live. But for the Greeks, of course, they would have had someone like Achilles or Hercules. It's like, this is when a young man is growing up and he's like, what should I become? Like nowadays we look at Conor McGregor and think, oh, let's be like him. I want to go fight. I want to imitate him. He's a hero. Then the Greeks would all look at Achilles and all that. And then during the Christian age, we're supposed to all look towards Christ. There's that seat in there. And of course, now we're moving on to the new Aion, which is the Aion of the Chad kangaroo. That's what we'll look to next. But we reached this very, very tentative period at the end of history, which was this notion of a challenge for what that hero should be. This is what Nietzsche's concept of the Übermensch was. So I'm going to get into that briefly because this is this is probably the deepest topic you can ever go into. It's like, what's the purpose of mankind? Because that's fundamentally what it's coming down to. What are we trying to build? What type of person are we trying to build? What type of society of people are we trying to build? What ideal do we lead them towards? So currently we're all pointed towards Christianity. Well, actually not anymore, but we were very, very heavily pointed towards Christianity for 2,000 years. And the last while, that's really, really loosened up. But that dynamic, and let's bring it personal before we get collective, that dynamic between this ideal in your mind and you is a very, very strange dynamic because there's a notion in there that you are not good enough compared to this hero. And what you need to do is you need to level up to the level of that hero. And so the hero becomes a redeeming figure in a sense, because when you suffer, you are trapped in this place where you're weak and feeble and not good enough. Fundamentally, you don't have enough status. You suffer because like you're not strong enough and all this. And then you have this conjuring image in your mind that you can overcome that suffering and become this great hero like Hercules, like Achilles, even like Christ of some sort. And that notion, and this is what's so strange about it, that notion, just that idea being in your head, that's all. It only needs to be in your head. That idea can be enough to inspire you to actually get out of your suffering. It's like that idea of, if you have a meaning to fight for, as Nietzsche says, to live is to suffer, to survive is to find meaning in the suffering. And so if you have this notion that there is a hero that you can aim for, then you will at the very least be able to climb out of that suffering and you'll get saved from that suffering. Never mind the idea of actually you evolving and having this amazing power in yourself to actually be able to transform. It's like this idea of you might be feeble and skinny and weak and all that. And if you just hit the gym hard enough and think about Arnold Schwarzenegger all day, you will eventually transform into a Chad kangaroo. Like you will turn into a big juicy version of yourself, and it's unbelievable when you do it. There's no experience like it growing. There's nothing quite like it. There's nothing quite like achievement based on you transforming and bringing something out of yourself. It's why people get addicted to stuff like climbing mountains and crazy shit, and they just lift heavy weights for the sake of it. There's some there's some affirmation of your ability to conquer yourself, like that's it, and transform into something higher that is life affirming and unequivocally. It's like unbelievable. And this is where we're in this tentative place, where that place for that hero fell when we lost Christ. Nietzsche tried to put the Ubermensch there and said we need to get an Ubermensch in there to keep everybody focused on excellence and moving up and keep achieving. But instead what happened is we never really got it seated properly, and people instead fell into the concept of the last man, which is we have now, which is a sort of degeneracy of manliness or male excellence, which is wrapped up in this idea of transformation. To be a man is to fundamentally believe that you can transform, and some men will transform, and like half of men will transform and change the world, and the other half of men will fail, and that's just the tragedy of men, whereas women are more stable in the way that they've existed in that sense. And so yes, there is this problem now. We're in a tentative place where we seem to be deifying something that is less than excellent. We may even be deifying the average and the weak man. James, any thoughts on the intellectual architecture I've laid out there? Any thoughts?
Yes, I thought it was a beautiful introduction. I'm sure people really enjoyed that. I sure did. Well done. Good job. It's we're going to talk about completeness today, becoming whole, becoming complete. I think everybody has that feeling, like maybe not in a passing conversation, because most interactions I have with other people are really shallow. But if you really sit down and talk to somebody properly, they'll start spilling their soul out to you immediately. Something I've noticed anyway, at least if you do it properly. And what you come to realize, and this is the same for every single one of you listening or watching to this now, is there's some feeling of incompleteness, that there's something to move towards. And wherever you are right now, whatever it happens to be, it's not the completeness. So your life in many ways is a battle between moving towards the completeness or staying where you are. But by the laws of physics, you can never stay where you are. You can only degenerate. So it's this constant struggle to try and not to degenerate, or to go up to whoever the hell you can be. What the hell does that even mean, though, to become complete? Because you all know what I'm talking about. What does that mean? Only you have some clear idea. I think your dreams tell you this. I really do. It's the self talking to you. I think your dreams are telling you things that you can do to compensate for your real life, to become just slightly more complete. And, things like in traditional self-improvement, you got things like you got to go to the gym and you've got to read books, and there's standard stuff everybody does because it fits within that normal formula. But this is more of a personal journey where, like, you wake up in the morning and you have a chance to live your day right, to have a proper day. So at the end of it, you can feel really good about yourself, and only you know how to do that. So what we're going to talk about in this, I suppose, is almost taking your life and turning it into a video game in many sense. Because with a video game, this is why they're so popular. It has to be. It's like, so you have the level and you have the game and you go through challenges. It's a heroic adventure that you really enjoy, way more exciting than your normal life. And then what do? You try and complete the game. And then if you're a nerd like me, you then go back through all the levels and try and collect everything else. So you literally 100% the game. But it's that idea. That's the framework of your life mapped out in a video game. It's like, we're going to move towards some abstract sense of completeness. And the more you explore it and the more you move towards it, the more that becomes clear to you. And that's incredibly exciting. And that's the invitation that Jung is going to give to you today.
Some more there. Yes, dude, you set up a lot of very interesting ideas in my head. Like that's a really, really good premise to put out there is we are cursed in some sense by this notion, this ability to imagine ourselves better than we are. Like why would God curse us with that? Why would God create us in such a way to say, you could be better than you are? It's like, fuck you, dude. Why didn't you just make me better?
Yeah.
Why did you make me so shit? Like, why did you make me at all if you're just going to make me shit? I guess that's the free will thing. But nonetheless, like, never mind the metaphysics. This is the reality we find ourselves in. And so I find a certain meme from self-help very, 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 very useful. I know self-help gets a lot of hassle, but I find this meme very, very useful. And that's the meme of the best version of yourself. Because I think that's a fantastic conception of that you have you. And if you take the right steps in the right direction, you will manifest the best version of yourself. It leads to another bigger question. That's a more complete version of yourself, It leads to a bigger question. What is the best version of yourself? And this is where this archetype of the hero becomes super interesting, because you have the old Greek heroes like Hercules. The best version of a Greek was, a Chad kangaroo, like a super strong, muscular man who fought labors. And the early heroes always started out as big, strong men who would go out and kill monsters in the jungle. And then they eventually evolved into warlords that would conquer space. And then you start to get characters like Odysseus, who is smart and who would outsmart reality. And suddenly this thing starts to become more like the concept of value changes. Then you get Christ, who was a purely spiritual man. And so that's a very interesting thing. What does Christ mean? Nietzsche then proposes a new hero, which is an Übermensch. And it's like, what is he proposing in his sense of perfection? What is our hero now? Like the man we have now that we deify, what do we deify as male heroic excellence? It's almost like a guy who's tolerant. That's it. And that's an interesting premise. Like, how does that affect people? Become the best version of yourself. And it's like, well, how do you do that? And you hear people say that. It's like, I'm trying to be nicer to people. And you're like, well, fuck, is that like, I'm like, maybe nothing against that, but is that really the pinnacle of your completion? Is that the end goal? Like, God made you not good enough. Was he hoping that someday you just become nicer? Is that what he wanted? Maybe it is. Like he does say in the Bible, or Jesus says in the Bible, he's like, God does not want animal sacrifice, he wants kindness. So it could be there, but nonetheless, there is these big questions, like what is the best version? What is that transformation? And this process, this psychological process, this psychological tension is so great that, as we've said before, the notion of paganism does seem to revolve around deifying emotions and turning them into figures that you can play with, you can worship, you can dramatize. So Eros and Aphrodite are like our love and our anger mixed together, and you're worshiping Ares when you're in the battle and whatnot, and you're worshiping Aphrodite when you meet a beautiful woman and get caught up with the Cupid thing and all that. And Odin is the same; it's a god of war, that type of energy. So Jung noticed, and this is in the archetypes of the collective unconscious, he has a very, very interesting chapter on symbols of transformation. And he noticed that there is this unbelievably consistent archetype among all tribes, because he did he walked through some African tribes, and he ran around and explored pagan rituals and all this stuff. And they'd have, the very, very common scene where you're jumping over a fire, stuff like that. I've actually got a picture here. I'm going to screen share for you, boys, here. Jumping over the fire, that type of stuff. Like, what's going on there? And even the cover image of this is the phoenix. What is this notion of jumping over the fire? Why are they doing stuff like this? Why do you initiate people into a tribe with the initiation rituals, where you get a little boy and then you make him fight the gods, and then he comes out and he's a man and he can never be a boy again? And the symbol that they did in the initiation ritual is they grab the boy out of his hut, bring him, and then his mother would have to be there, and the mother and the boy would have to like dramatically get broken apart, and the boy would have to be said, you're going to die and she can't save you, you've lost her forever. It has to be drilled into his mind psychologically that your mother is no longer your friend, she's gone, done, and you're now an adult. And that was the kind of whole end premise. And there was all these like rituals around this idea of, you are broken, you are original sin, you do suffer, there's something wrong with you, but you can be fixed, you can be transformed, you can be redeemed, there's something in you that's valuable. And that seems to be the end abstraction of the highest form of a hero, which is that ability to transform. It's not actually the Chad kangaroo that people value the most.
Yes, it is.
Sorry, dude. Yeah, okay, conclude the lecture. I got that wrong. But you see what I'm saying? Like, even though the Chad kangaroo is the most important thing, people tend to value this transformational spirit, and they've turned it into semi-Chad kangaroos like Jesus and whatnot, because that is something that is so profound that it can take you out of any situation. It's universal. Like, you can transform from weak to strong, you can transform from sad to happy, you can transform to, it's like the emotional process itself. So I found that super interesting, seeing that going on. Jimmy Boyo, any thoughts, sir?
Yeah, it's actually quite easy to, it's always fun to talk about heroes' journeys and to what these great characters of fiction would go off and do, and you're inspired by them. It's like, I wish I was Odysseus blinding cyclopses and being a real G and being a king as well at the same time. But once you finish reading the book, you sort of sit there and you're like, what? Like, I can't do that. I can't go blind cyclopses unless you sort of treated half-blind people as cyclopses and you were going to ritually act it out by finding these people and blinding them. But that would be, of course, psychopathic beyond belief. So what the hell does it mean to go on a hero's journey? And in many ways, of course, it's trying to be the best version of yourself, which, by the way, I found really fun that some of the original self-help characters, we'll say like Elliot Hulse and Tony Robbins and these guys, they all become really spiritual after a while, which is really fun to watch. Tony Robbins got weird rituals that he does, and Elliot Hulse decided to give up weightlifting for a while and then just do yoga and relaxing. It's like, that's really cool. But what Jung uncovered, and the characters that came after Jung, was like, what if what Odysseus is doing in these great myths is not actually going out and killing cyclopses and running away from the underworld and other such things? What if it's a projection from the unconscious? It's like, that's the hero's journey. So what you'll find, all the classic texts that make up our civilization exist in that place for a reason, because they are a projection of the hero's journey onto the page. So what's Odysseus doing? It's like, this becomes complicated, and there are papers, if you're interested, you can look them up or whatever. But he has his mission, which is to reunite with his queen. And in alchemy, if you're interested, that Jung has a book called Mysterium Conjunctionis. It's a very, very scary book. There's this idea of the divine marriage, the divine conjunctio, where the ultimate goal which Odysseus needs to do is alchemically join with his wife and become the ultimate king and queen as a whole over his kingdom. And to do that, what does he do? He goes into hell and confronts the shadow in the unconscious. Lots of the people which are challenging him are different versions of women. And we know from Carl Jung's books that men have to confront the woman in the unconscious. So what's he doing? He's confronting the shadow and the anima to become whole. It's like, okay. And that's the genius of Jung. He noticed that we can't literally go off and go slay dragons, but we also can, because that's what those stories mean. It's the dragons in our own heads, the dragons in our own minds, that when you confront your anima, when you confront your own insufficiencies, your own shadow, that's the exact same thing. It's literally the exact same thing as Odysseus going and telling the weird little nymph lady to go, to fuck off somewhere. It's exactly the same thing. And that's really, really exciting, because it means that we're all heroes and heroines going on our own journey. And once you can sort of absorb that, once you reconnect with your culture, which we've been robbed of, and I don't know if it's conspiracy robbed, I don't know if we've just naturally lost it, maybe both, I don't know. But once you reconnect with that, it's like life has meaning again. I'm now on a journey to go and make myself complete, whatever that happens to be. And I don't know what that happens to be, but I know it's there and it's waiting for me. And there's that challenge. So rather than be a little nihilistic child in your parents' basement crying, it's like, literally pick up your sword and go on your journey. Very exciting stuff.
I think our culture has been subverted, man. I think the Chad kangaroos with their massive IQs, they're just like, guys, like, muscle is good, but we don't want to beat these guys to a pulp until they're like, literally, like, we want them to serve us as slaves. So that was their plan.
If you keep dropping truth bombs like that, this is going to be shut down.
Yeah,
you know that it's going to be shut down. Sorry, overlords.
Overlords, I'm sorry. To be honest, like, I don't even think we should call them overlords anymore now that the caliphate has come. The kangaroo caliphate is here. Like, it's not really that the YouTube guys are overlords anymore. Like, I think we should honor the true overlords, because they're not forgiving. Like, they want obedience, über alles. Like, and it's weird that they speak German as well. What the fuck? Let's there's something I really wanted to say though, but I've sort of forgot it from talking shit. Oh fuck. Okay, yes, right, I've got it. So you were talking about the hero's journey, which is like fantastically articulated, and James actually breaks into the Odyssey on his channel. Pop over to his channel, check it out if you're into that. He rips it apart. He rips out Dante as well, and these are massive hero stories. These are spinal segments of the Western canon, unbelievable stories. But there's an interesting problem where if you're robbed of that story, if you don't have it, or if you don't connect to it, we can say that, you do go into that nihilistic spiral. And it's super strange, because when you're in that nihilistic spiral, all these emotional patterns are still there. You still necessarily need a transformation. You still need to feel, because you still feel shit, because you still suffer. You're never going to escape suffering. Life's always going to be uncomfortable, right? And so you still will need a reason to suffer. You'll need something, and most people might project it onto hedonism, just blatant emotional fulfillment. They might just start doing that. That is one basic premise or basic form of nihilism, is that they just get into drugs like opiates, or they just get into, they just become degenerate in that type of way. They're just like, oh, instant pleasure. And that's the only thing I aim for. And every time you lose the high, you go find another high. So you're stuck in that cycle. That's your transformation. It's super interesting because that's actually how your emotions work. Like even when you're hungry and all that, this is the neuroscience of it. You'll be in this state of being, and your brain will start to activate this idea, this notion of like a sandwich. And the sandwich becomes a savior. Like the sandwich is your savior. That's what's so crazy about it. And so you will start dreaming of the sandwich being like, fucking, that'd be class. Oh yeah. And like put a bit of ham in it, and hopefully the kangaroos won't come and take it off me. And it's like, and then that motivates you to go up and eat that sandwich to achieve that transformation. And that experience, you've like fantasized about the sandwich for about 20 minutes. You go out and you make it, and it's great. But then afterwards, you're sort of like, all right, well, that was the sandwich. And then you're back to baseline again. And then something new comes up. So it's like that spiral of transformation is still there. It's still problematic. And someone who's nihilistic, who doesn't believe in heroes, doesn't believe in a future, this is it. Like you need a big vision of a future, or else you'll be stuck in these low-level spirals of hedonism. And if you try to come out of those low-level spirals as a nihilist and question, what's the point of life? What is the point of these hedonic spirals? Why am I here? What am I doing? You get trapped in this idea of there is no point. And so the only way that you can achieve transformation is by getting revenge on the world for not giving you a meaning to suffer. And that becomes your meaning. You become this this warrior against the world of sorts. And I've even felt that in myself. Like there's this energy where you want to just burn everything down as punishment. It's like, why? It's that question Jesus had on the cross. Why, God, have you forsaken me? And when he doesn't answer you, you said, God, I will forsake you. You take everything he has and you try grab its face and stick it in the mud and say, die, fuck you. This is my catharsis. Because that's what you're looking for. Eating that sandwich is catharsis. And then destroying the world, burning the world is catharsis. And that's the energy, I think, possessed inside the Joker in Batman when he says, when Albert says, some men just want to watch the world burn. Like that's the energy he's getting at there, is that when you can't find justification, meaning, redemption, a hero, a point, you find destruction as the only point. And it's a super interesting psychological pattern. Shall we get into it, sir?
Let's crack into this beautiful old book. A nice sound of crisp paper.
Yes, what was that? Was that a formal soy merchant document?
Prepared for these ladies. Unlike you. Okay, people, we're on page 40. We really haven't got that far into the book, have we?
No. We've been talking about how we might speed this up and maybe do broader summaries as opposed to close reading. So tell us what you think about that. Would you rather us just talk more metaphors, stories, as opposed to actually reading the text? Because there's a lot of very heavy stuff coming up soon. But nonetheless, tell us about that. James, power on there, though.
Yeah. So in later paragraphs, Jung, he lays out pages of astrological signs and pages of alchemy. So we could go through and break it down piece by piece, or we could talk about the kangaroo caliphate and give a general idea. So it's up to you. It's completely up to you. So paragraph 73. The God image in man that was damaged by the first sin can be reformed with the help of God, in accordance with Romans 12:2, quote, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that you may prove what is the will of God, end quote. The totality images which the unconscious produces in the course of an individuation process are similar reformations of an a priori archetype, the mandala. As I have already emphasized, the spontaneous symbols of the self, or of wholeness, cannot in practice be distinguished from a God image. Despite the word be transformed in the Greek text of the above quotation, the renewal of the mind is not meant as an actual alteration of consciousness, but rather as the restoration of an original condition, an apokasta, I can't pronounce these words, apokatastasis. My English falls apart. You do English. You can tell people what that means.
You fucking dickhead. So well, I'm dyslexic until it comes to the hard words. Is that what it is?
I know what the word is. I just can't pronounce it. Who cares? This is in exact agreement with the empirical findings of psychology that there is an ever-present archetype of wholeness, which may easily disappear from the purview of consciousness, or may never be perceived at all until a consciousness illuminated by conversion recognizes it in the figure of Christ or in a Chad kangaroo. As a result of this anamnesis, the original state of oneness with the God image is restored. It brings about an integration, a bridging of the split in the personality caused by the instincts striving apart in different and mutually contradictory directions. The only time the split does not occur is when a person is still as legitimately unconscious of his instinctual life as an animal, but it proves harmful and impossible to endure when an artificial unconsciousness, a repression, no longer reflects the life of the instincts. Dun, dun. Dun, dun, dun.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
Well, there's one thing. There's one thing I definitely want to talk about, which is another archetype, the archetype of the divine child, very tightly related to the archetype of transformation. So we're hitting into some heavy shit here, because we're hitting into big abstractions that are very consistent and therefore very reliable. I've talked before about that kingdom archetype, which is has a very reliable position in psychology and the mind, and therefore you can use it to predict people quite well. Like, you know what Richard Spencer is going to be doing for the next 20 years. And you know what George Soros is going to be doing for the next 20 years. They just have their notions of how the world should be. They have their conceptions of the kingdom. The conception of the transformation, the need to transform, is an archetype, and it's often personified as this notion of the divine child. There's a very famous play by Samuel Beckett known as I think it's called Endgame. And actually, we're talking about nihilism in this Beckett. Beckett is an Irishman, by the way, so he's like way better than James. And he
not even gonna comment. It's just immature.
It actually really was. That was just like anyway, focus. So Samuel Beckett has this play about Endgame, and it's this nihilistic wasteland where there's these two really old boomers essentially, and they've just got like I'm being so immature today. They're sitting in their room, and it's like, a waste. It's like a nuclear holocaust bunker, and they're both sitting there. And at the very end of the play, a child appears outside. And everything is gray textured, but this child is like shining. And it's that image of hope, the future transformation. I've talked about Stanley Kubrick's 2001, where at the very end you get that symbol of the child that caps it off. And of course, they found out in many of the people who worked in Magician, Warrior, Lover, King and all that they talk to these men who would be all jaded about life and believe that there's no point, there's no way forward, there's no future, there's no way you can transform. And eventually they would break through all this and access the realm of the archetypes, which would re-inspire them. And that would usually manifest as a child would start to appear in their dreams. And that would also come in concert with the instinct to have children. Because when you believe there is a future, then it's justified to have kids. But when you don't believe there's any future, you don't believe in having children. Why would you bring children in a world that has no future? That's evil. When you believe in the future, when you believe in transformation, when you believe in the human spirit, which is transformation, then you're like, well, why wouldn't I bring kids? Children, the divine child is the only way where we can save this world. It's the youth or the future. So there's the redemptive power of the child, and the child appears as magic. I remember having dreams. I did lots of dream reading, as I said before, and there was this. Eventually, this kid started to show up, and it was this kid could like turn back time and all this stuff. He'd like super magic powers. It was crazy. And there's this profound energy wrapped in this idea. Nietzsche talks about it too. It's everywhere. Nietzsche talks about it too. Nietzsche would say, you need to achieve the seriousness of a child at play. And he talked about the metamorphosis of man. You start off as a camel, then you transform into a lion, and then eventually the final form of the human soul is actually a child, a tyrant artist child, of course, according to Nietzsche. And it's that energy of the redemptive energy of a creative, hopeful, crazy, willing spirit, like a boyo, essentially. That energy personified at the very end game. And if you can capture that in your soul, as even as an old man, you can be both a man and a child. Like, you'll be happy. You'll find all the happiness. You'll have all the creativity. It's all there for you already. And this is where it becomes fascinating. Fascinating is that that's a step back when you think about it. That's a return to how you were as a childhood. And there's this almost archetypal problem with life where you're born as a child in an Oedipal situation where you're protected and your child mind is allowed to flourish, and you become imaginative and crazy and idealistic and lose touch with reality to some sense. You have a new perspective. Then you grow up, you get initiated, you lose all that, you become jaded, harsh, warrior-like, brutal. You engage with the world, you develop strength and manliness, and then the next step, the final transformation, is actually to go back and remember what you had as a child. And somehow, with this now built Chad kangaroo body, you need to give space for this divine child to be reborn in some sense, and that becomes your creative spirit. And that's often personified in this idea of Christ. Christ is often considered the divine child. I've got a few pictures there, and James, have you any thoughts on what I just said?
Go through and show the nice pictures, because I'm very excited as to what you're going to show.
All right. These ones aren't actually that gas. Well, here's Jesus ascending. So this is one idea of transformation, in that this man is God man, this son of man. He came down. That's another idea, you know. It's like the son of man. What is that? That's a child. So this is man.
He's actually, just quickly, I know no one can see when I speak, but I don't care. He's actually ascending in a cross-like shape, which I never noticed before.
Yeah, it's like a dance move.
It does. It's quite strange.
So this is man, and this is the final form of man, the son of man, and it's the divine child. It's the apotheosis of mankind, and it is a spiritually perfect man. And this is what it's getting at. Like, as I said, you start off as the Oedipal situation at the start, where you're just a boyo. You're just not even a boyo. Like, you're just a kid. You don't really know what's going on, but you have this vibrant energy, and everybody loves being around you. And it's just pure goodness. It's pure raw. It's just great energy. But then you have to become a jaded, hardcore warrior. And that's Hercules. That's where that hero shows up. That's where it's someone like capable of dealing with life. But then there is the next level, is actually to somehow unify those two, unify Hercules and the divine child. So you need to have the cold, hard, ruthless ability to take life and establish order and be brutal, but also still have space for this positive, idealistic energy. And this is what I think Jesus represented. It was almost as if the human species, mankind itself, had gone through its ruthless warrior stage with the Greeks and the Romans. And then it was time, it was the Aion, where they needed to start to embrace the creative, more whatever this is version of doing things, where we moved away from the concept of brutal domination and war to more towards like creative spirit of some sort. So like, is there something going on there? Maybe. I'm not saying that's what's going on, but that's an interesting way to think about it. Is that why our hero transitioned to this character? Because he represented a part of herself that's more useful than the Roman notion of just brutal, strong heroes or something like that. Although Nietzsche would disagree, but nonetheless, you see what I'm getting at here. And then this is the divine child again with Mother Mary. And this is the apotheosis of the woman, her ability to create this potential, which is guaranteeing the future. It's the greatest achievement of mankind right here. This is a very, very sacred image. What do you think, Jimmy?
I like it. It almost takes the words away from me, and I'm not being cheesy with this because it's very easy to, but
yeah, it's so powerful. I'm like even looking at the little boyo here in his hands, and he's just like looking like a G. He's just like, I got you, boys. You're like, you fucking do. Trust
yeah,
you.
he's gonna grow up to be a good, strong boyo, and it's like that's humanity. That's always been humanity. Every single person has a mother and father, whether you like it or not. And that unbroken chain of correct energy, divine energy, has produced you and everyone else like you. And it's an absolutely beautiful thing, and it's something that we've depedestalized off of our culture, and it's really, really upsetting. It's like, but it's confusing. Just going political, I guess, for a moment, it's like we don't know what to do about like women working and birth control pills, etc. Because it's like, well, why should we pedestalize that now, when everyone could just be the same and work and enjoy ourselves, and then birth rates can plummet down because who really cares? It doesn't really matter. We can make up for that with immigration, we'll say. It doesn't matter, but it does create, I think a lot of people feel there's some kind of sickness that goes along with that.
There's 100%, like, people talk about that stuff in a very trivial level, and like there's a deeper level to that people aren't able to articulate because people just aren't good at going into their deep unconscious. And the best way you can do this is by studying antinatalism, which is the belief that the world is evil, and that and like, this is the nihilistic perspective. Like, as I said, you get stuck in this hedonic spin, and then you look out and you try to say to yourself, what's the point of my life? What can I transform towards? What's my higher goal? There is none. It's like, it's not there. And so you conclude that there's no point to life. There's no future. And so the divine child is wrapped up with the notion of the future. You're in that warrior stage where you're engaging with reality. You don't see any future. And so what happens is, just say there's no future, so therefore there's no point in bringing a child into this world because that's too evil. This is antinatalism. There's also this problem where we've got the earth, and if we just keep breeding, then we're going to destroy the earth because we're filthy consumers, because the human nature is evil. There is also that notion that human nature itself is negative, because we're endless consumers. Because remember, nihilists are stuck in this hedonic loop. So all they can conceptualize as life is just this meaningless consumption loop with no point at the end. And for that reason, they think that all they're doing is slowly swallowing the earth. And also, because they're slowly swallowing the earth, there's no point bringing a child into it because the earth will just fall apart. And so antinatalism has become huge recently, where people are saying, well, we're just destroying the environment. The more kids we have, everybody's having kids, so the environment's going to get ruined and the world's going to collapse. And so there's no point me engaging in that. And that's the archetype is dead. It's blatant sacrifice of the divine child. It's a dead archetype. And this is how serious this stuff is that if this archetype is faulty, if it's misaligned, it will end up in people making life choices that will change history. Like, if you get enough people worshipping the dead divine child archetype, the anti-human archetype, because anti-child is fundamentally anti-human. If you get enough people performing in that cult, you will destroy a population. And it's this demon has risen. This is currently where we're at. We've got a badly aligned archetypal child, if you will. And it's tied up in this notion of the Jesus and the Messiah as well. It's so big and insane. It's so hard to get your head around, but it literally shines there like the sun. And it's something that's really, really problematic. And it's a psychological sickness, and it's a legitimate threat to humanity at the moment. Like, it's crazy because the fertility rates are one thing. Like, that's just absolutely astounding what's going on. And yeah, man, it's a very, very weird problem. Very, very weird problem. And I've got something big to say about this, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as we move into evil.
To nihilism and antinatalism recently to study it was why are people getting caught up in this? When I first heard of antinatalism, it was like, I've never heard something more obscene in my entire life. I think having children is evil, but all the antinatalists are very rational people. They have created this idea with their own minds and they've fallen in love with it. Well, I actually don't believe at all that what they're saying is what they actually believe. So they're like, okay, bringing children into the world is a bad thing because all we can guarantee in life is suffering, and we're destroying the world anyway. So the best thing to do is not have kids. It's like absolutely rubbish, complete and utter rubbish, because you can see how hypocritical individuals like this are, because they're not in complete control of their own lives. They'll still follow their impulses left, right, and center. It's like you would think somebody who had that powerful rationality would say to themselves, I will go to the gym 7 days a week at this specific time, and I will do it because it's the rational thing to do. It's like, you're not going to do that. Complete and utter rubbish. You're still going to engage in all the nonsense that you've engaged with your entire life. I think it's a deep, deep nihilism on a psychological level, not rational level, and the rationality is to try and cover it. But what we're dealing with, of course, is not an argument, a coherent argument. It's the archetypal energy. It's that deep nihilism. It's like you can see all the people who believe in this stuff. They believe in a set of ideas. So it's like, okay, we're destroying the environment. Having children is evil, but we also are really big fans of, we'll say, open borders and other ideologies and cultures which have very big birth rates, and we're not going to tell them to stop. It was like, okay, where's your consistency? It doesn't exist. It's a hatred for you. It's like you, your life, and you haven't had your hero's journey. It's been ripped away from you for whatever purpose, and maybe you can have sympathy there, but you're using that, and you've created a rationality to make up for that, fallen in love with that, and then you want to impose it on everybody else around you to make up for your own insufficiencies. It is such a tragic idea, and it's actually like a heartbreaking idea. It's almost like they wish they could value that divine child picture that you showed, but they can't do it. Their soul is broken, and they just can't do it.
It's crazy. It is like fun. Like that's a great way to put it, man. And congratulations, Jimmy Boyo. That's fucking nailed it there, Boyo. Like,
Thank you.
it is that notion that it's not a rational debate. It's not like, oh, but the statistics say that, like we should be fine if we have a few more births. It'd be grand. Like in a British accent. But you know what I mean? It's not like that. It is a fundamental, it actually revolves. This is why I say these ideas are big. It revolves around literally one thing. It's like a light switch or like a light bulb. Is the divine child faulty? Is it not flickering, or is it on? It's either on or off. So do people believe in a future? If they do, well, bang, things, like if that's strong, things will start to go better. That cult of the divine child will be better. You'll see people start to find heroes, more believe in human nature, more fertility, all the good things, hope, future, all of that stuff gets guaranteed, all wrapped into one. It's so potent, it's unbelievable. And then if it's not, like, just waterfall collapse, black sky, suddenly everybody's just looking up being like, oh, look, a black hole, that's class, wow, empty, endless death. Like, if we went there, like, it'd just literally eat us. That's like, yay. Like, that's never given us any life at all. And it's just this notion of just pure nihilism. It's and it all falls apart. No child, no future, no point, no belief in human nature, no potential, no ability to transform, no death, negative entropy, all that type of stuff. And this is where we start to get into the conception of evil. And this is where Jung starts to hammer on Christianity hard and actually rattles it pretty hardcore. This is where Jung does a pretty decent critique of Christianity. It shakes me up quite a lot. And he starts saying that the concept of evil is a difficult one to get around our heads because Christianity talks about bravado boni. So we'll get into that in a bit. But I want to use this schema here. If you don't believe in this divine child archetype, this savior, this messiah, this sense, and you believe in this opposite one, which is that there is no redemptive qualities to humanity, it premised on you cannot transform. Humans cannot transform, and therefore humans are not necessarily good. They're just consumption machines that have no long-term goal because they have no ability to transform into something better than what they are. They start to sink into this spiral of anti-humanism. Humans are useless, essentially. And this negativity projected towards humanity starts to evolve into this weird need to try change the game of sorts. It takes this idea that humans have no individual ability to transform and save themselves. So the only way that we can make the world a more rational and better place is by building a system on top of it that is capable of doing this. This is where we start to get into the notion of giant machines. Like communism is premised on this. I know I rant about this a lot, but it is fundamentally what Marx was getting at when he was saying that we need to create this dictatorship of the proletariat. We need to zoom all the resources towards this one organizing center that kind of sat on the top of society and reduced everybody into a digit, a beast, a useless animal, because they have no redemptive, restorative human nature. They're just a hedonistic animal that needs to be tamed properly in order to create a perfect machine. So these people, as we said, these archetypes are always need to be there. And in order for someone like Marx to find wholeness, because he couldn't transform himself. If you actually study Marx's life, he was quite a pathetic character. Like he was always broke. His mother said something along these lines. His mother said, I wish Carl would gather more capital as opposed to writing about it. And he was always broke. He was always struggling. His wife and his children were always sick and they lived in a cold house and shit like that. He was a very, very non-transformed person. He was far from a Chad kangaroo. But he still has that need for wholeness, So some people might get that nihilistic thing and be like, destroy the world. Other people might get this need to create they need perfection somewhere. So they intellectualize their perfection. And so what Marx might have did is been like, how do I create a perfect system? And this is where he'd start going on that route of like spiraling into communism. You see this energy in the movement of cybernetics that went into the building of the internet. This is a pretty dark black pill, people, but the internet was there's a lot of people who were thinking about the internet as a tool for regulating people's emotions and control. It's like a mind control tool. So the way they saw it initially is that they were getting rats, and they found that you can control a rat very effectively if you can control the maze that it's in. So the idea is that if we build a giant machine that we can upload everybody's consciousness into, then that's essentially the maze. And then if you can control the maze, that's you can control the people inside the maze. And so if you think about what the internet is now, everybody's on social media. Social media has rules about stuff you can talk about and what you can't talk about. And that's essentially the walls. That's the walls of that maze. And so that's what's going on with that thing. And these are, it's the same set of people. Like, it's the same energy going into it. It's like humans cannot save themselves. So we need to regulate them of some sorts. And this is where we start getting into this notion of anti-humanism, and it could be this. Could it be behind all this is this idea of Satan himself, the beast 666? Is that what they meant by that beast machine 666? Where it is this energy, this archetype in us that loses faith in humanity, because God fundamentally, or the Christian idea, is that humanity is valuable. But the satanic idea is that humanity is not valuable. And so we need to take from it its redemptive quality and organize it to make it into something better than it is. And it's a big, big thought. Any thoughts, Jimmy Boyle?
I have many thoughts. Well, what I'm going to do, I think most productive would be to remove the black pill from this, because it gets quite depressing, and because what Jung talked about in the last paragraph was actually really, really hopeful. So what he's basically saying is Christianity is correct in its general framework. So the Christian idea, there was a quote there, it was like, renew your mind so you can prove the will of God. And it's like, that's really cool. So the Christian idea is you need to reform yourself so that you become like the God image, because you're broken. Whoever you are, you're broken, and you know you're broken. I'm not going to keep telling you you're broken. You know you are. And what you need to do is to become whole. And in this Christian sense, it's going back towards that wholeness image, which is Christ. Right. So and you do that through living like Christ, more or less. And what Christ did is he took the Mosaic law, which was like, this is what you need to do. And there were some strange rituals and things in there, but it was good for a society. But then what he did is he made it way more individuation-y by saying, aha, I'm going to make this even stricter on you. You now have to have control over your mind and your thoughts as well. You know, you can't lust after women. You can't have evil thoughts or anything like that. So it's like there is this image of absolute perfection in Christ. Anyone who reads the gospel, I find it really difficult for someone to read about Christ and come out with anything less than a pristine opinion of the man. I think even atheists would agree with that. It's like, there's something admirable about what he was doing. He was able to go around, like, if you read the Gospels, essentially what he's doing, being surrounded by hordes of fans, is healing the sick of the mind, so the possessed, and casting out demons in a really cool way. He's just like, demons out. They're like, fine. He's healing the mind and he's healing the body in terms of sickness as well. And both of those things together, a healness, a reformation, a return to perfection. So what the hell does that mean? It's like you need to return to a perfection state from whence you came, right? From dust to dust, ashes to ashes, all that stuff. God created you, and now you will return back to the wholeness, which is God. And there's the Jungian idea is exactly the same thing. You just switch the language around, where he's saying,
yeah, wow.
being is to go and become complete, and that's the individuation process, and the demons are all inside yourself, and you have to make yourself complete so that all of your wills, so your will, which the shadow will pull you towards, the will and anima will pull you towards your animal instinct in one way. What you need to do is to bring them all together in a sense of completeness. And as you go through individuation and you pull these projections back inside yourself, all these wills start eventually to come together into one, which is reforming the will of God, which is exactly what the Christian idea said, because the will of God comes from the self, which is, and Nietzsche talked about this as well with his idea of the will to power. And he's like, life is just wills fighting over the top of each other. Even all the old philosophers, you're not actually reading philosophy. You're reading their will trying to dominate the other wills of all the other philosophers. It's just a will battle. So he's like, what you need to do is your will. You have to have the strongest will to the highest excellence. It's exactly the same idea. It's exactly the same idea without Nietzsche even knowing it, where it's like, unify the will in the best possible direction, and that direction is completeness. All the differences, Christianity and Jungian psychology, exactly the same thing. And this is why people will respond to the image of Christ, because of what it represents. It's a symbol. Now, it might not just be a symbol. He might also be the Son of God, and he might have resurrected from the dead, and the stories are literally true. But we do know for a fact that he is a symbol of the self, and when you see it, you resonate very strongly with it and you convert, because it's an acted out version of the individuation process. And that's why it is so incredibly powerful. And that really, really excites me. That's it lifts me up rather than focusing on transhumanism, communists, we're all going to die type dynamic.
I will definitely touch on that again, James. I'm sorry, but I will follow up on what you said, because that was some excellent articulations there. You sparked an idea in my head that it is in some sense like, what if what Christ was doing when he was dealing with the possessed is that he could see this archetype shit in a very intuitive way, like he was, because he was the legit real deal. Like he could see stuff on this level. So when he met someone who was possessed by this demon of anti-human antinatalism, and like you could like when you meet someone like that, because it's the way they act, the way they talk, it's in them. It's like there's something in them. And so was it like, was he third eye open dude, where he'd see someone like this, and it's literally like the way he'd see it is there's this big black alien figure just sitting on their face or some shit like that, and he'd come in and be like, get the fuck off that dude, what the fuck are you doing, like, leave him alone. And is it that type of vibe where he'd walk in, and what he was like, what that is that you are, as a child, you're fine, you're perfect. And maybe you're like, I'm being idealistic here, but like, is that the way it works? That like, as a child, yes, you're perfect. There's nothing wrong with you. You have your optimism. And then what happens is life comes along, it starts to wound you. And that's when demons can start to possess you. And so you start off perfect, and then you go into life like Hercules, you fight with the monsters. You're probably going to get like one of them's going to bite onto you. And then suddenly you're now walking around with a fucking monster in your head. Like it's caught you. Like this notion. Yes. This notion has caught you, and does Jesus walk in and see this monster sitting on your face or on your chest or some shit like that? And does he say, for fuck's sake, like, look what happened to you? It's like when you find that bird and its legs have been wrapped together by like a 6-pack plastic top or some sort, and you're like, oh, for fuck's sake, and you cut it off, and you're like, there you go, you're fine, you're back to what you were. And is that what Jesus was doing? Is Jesus personified as that energy that would come in, take off the creepy spirit of antinatalism, and be like, look, go back to the divine child. Go back to how you were before. And then suddenly people are like, oh shit, I'm grand. Oh yeah, fucking thanks for that, Jesus. Like, that's class. Like, I'm feeling great now. And is that simply what it was? Like, well, is that a reductionist way of looking at what it was? Was he simply spotting people's delusions and bringing them back to their truth, which was what they actually were? Their nature was fine. And there's an astounding weird side of things as well, where if you look into near-death experiences and stuff like that, you'll hear stories like this where a woman has cancer and she'll die and she'll go deep into herself and she'll meet God and the whole pantheon and all that. And they will tell her it's not your time. And then they'll bring her to her cancer and she'll crack open her cancer and find inside of it she'll find inside of it a message. And it's essentially that she hates herself. And then when she'll forgive herself. And it's almost like a child, like going back to yourself experience. It's like, oh my God, this cancer was literally like a demon in my mind. And she would like heal it. She would say, oh God, I hated myself. There's no need to hate myself. I'm a good person and all this. I've got potential in me. And then she'd wake up and then the doctors would come in and be like, your cancer is completely remissed. We thought you were dead. What the fuck just happened? Mm-hmm. And these are like loads of shit like this happens. Loads of shit like this happens. And they just have to write it off as a spontaneous remission. You can look this stuff up. Don't think I'm talking shit. Do not think I'm saying that you can cure cancer though either, because that the overlords do not like inside their little rat's maze. But nonetheless, it's things like this that show you that these things are way more profound than we think. Like they have a physiological effect on that level. And we don't know how far that goes. What does that do? And so when someone comes in and they take out a possession of a silly notion, like, maybe they are healing your body in some sense. Like, who fucking knows, man?
Yeah, there's a particularly nice exorcism which I really like because it illustrates this beautifully. You know, I had 15 years of Catholic education and they never taught me this story, and it is a class story. It just makes me think, like, what else haven't I been told? But basically, Jesus, he's like hanging about. He like goes across the sea, and he comes to this land. I think it begins with G. And there's like loads of tombs around, and there's this wild boyo who's running around. He's insane, clinically insane, and he's there like cutting himself with rocks. The people around, they can't even chain him down because he just eats through the chains, and he's like screaming and running around. And they're just like, yeah, fuck him. We'll just sort of leave him to his own devices. Be a strange man. And then Jesus comes up to him, and immediately the evil spirit in the man knows it's Jesus and comes up to Jesus and like falls at his feet. And Jesus says, "What is your name?" And the demon speaks through the man, and he says, "My name is Legion, for we are many." And then the spirit begs Jesus. He's like, "Please don't send us out of the country. Don't banish us." So Jesus goes, "Fine," and he sends these evil spirits into a like a what do you call a group of pigs? A horde of pigs?
Oh, yeah.
A gabble of pigs, whatever it happens to be, sends them into the pigs.
A British of pigs or something like that. I'm not sure.
A British of pigs, very good.
Or an English of pigs.
He takes these evil demons, this collection of demons from the man, sends them into the pigs, and then drowns them in the sea. So he drowned. It even says in brackets there were 2,000 of them. Like, he drowned 2,000 pigs in the sea after possessing them with demons. And the man is healed. And he's like, "Oh my goodness, Christ, take me with you." And he's like, No. You don't get to come with me. Go back to your friends and family and go live a good life. So, if to try and break down that story, one, you want to tell me Jesus is not an alpha male drowning 2,000 pigs in the sea? For God's sake. But what he's saying is those things which don't belong, those pathologies, what we're going to do is we're going to take them from the land, which is consciousness, and we're going to throw them into the sea, which is unconsciousness. The consciousness and unconsciousness are going to touch, and they're going to integrate together. And then he becomes whole and can go become one with his family again. And the thing which is doing that is that symbol of wholeness, Christ, who's going around doing that whole process. And it's like, that is amazing. And it's also a really good story. Why was I not taught that? Is that not the best story in the Bible?
I think it's just really hard because people don't know what that means. Because like if you say to someone, "Oh, move the evil spirit out of the person," they're just like, "Oh, woo." Nowadays, so it's very hard to get a base perspective in this stuff. Like I struggle with it too. Like there's many stories in the Bible where like Ezekiel and all that stuff, and I'm like, what is going on here? Like God is making him lie on his side and eat shit for 40 days and stuff like that, and you're like, man, what why is this going on? But it does seem that there is you have to spend a lot of time to try break it apart and see what's going on, try figure it out. So who knows? Shall we keep churning forward? That's a really good story, though. Shall we keep churning forward?
Let's churn forward.
And then we'll churn forward. We'll have a riff, and then we'll do questions, people. So if you have any questions, they will be coming up soon.
Yeah, we do like those questions, especially the incredibly awkward personal ones. Paragraph 74. There can be no doubt, my friends, that the original Christian conception of the Imago Dei, embodied in Christ, meant an all-embracing totality that even includes the animal side of man. Nevertheless, the Christ symbol lacks wholeness in the modern psychological sense, since it does not include the dark side of things, but specifically excludes it in the form of a Luciferian opponent. Although the exclusion of the power of evil was something the Christian consciousness was well aware of, all it lost in effect was an insubstantial shadow. For, through the doctrine of the privatio bonae, first propounded by Origen, evil was characterized as a mere diminution of good and thus deprived of substance. According to the teachings of the church, evil is simply, quote, the accidental lack of perfection, end quote. This assumption resulted in the proposition, quote, omni bonum ad Deo, omni malum ab homine, which means all good from God, all evil from man. Another logical consequence was the subsequent elimination of the devil in certain Protestant sects. Class paragraph, class.
I find a lot of problems with this because I think Jung is criticizing specifically the notion of what the Christian church created in terms of the philosophy of evil. Whereas Christ, if you read the actual Bible itself, this is the dictum for our entire Aion, what does often turn around and say there is an evil one. Like he says that if you do this, you are giving in to the evil one. And so what I get out of reading the Gospels is that Christ is asserting that there is a organizing force in this world. Now, this is a very crazy idea, so allow me a second to talk about it a bit. But there's this organizing force in the world who gets into your mind, possesses you, and makes you behave in such a way that you obey its plan. So say if you worship God and do the right thing for God, you are contributing towards his plan, and his plan will fundamentally be to bring the kingdom of God to life. So if you act like a good person, tell the truth, and do charity and all that stuff, and be a good boyo, and you get enough people doing this together, you will build Christian Europe. Like that's the sort of premise. And Christian Europe was a kingdom of heaven. There was nothing quite like that. That is like the opposite of some crazy Amazonian jungle of some sort. So it's an unbelievably stable, beautiful place for like high art and just like healthy people, So if there's an opposite to that, like if there's this sort of obedience to, you give into your eros and your dark energies, and you lie and you cheat and you be naughty, is that giving into the evil one's plan? And so what is the evil one's plan fundamentally? And if you think, for example, like communism, how it manifested, that was premised on lying. Like in communism, you were supposed to inform in your family. 2 out of 5 people were informers. So like your dinner table, half of them were going to like rat you out to the police and all this shit. It was an anti-life. It was almost like the machine of the evil one. So if the kingdom of God was the kingdom of following God, if you get enough people following God, if you get enough people following the negative stuff, you get the Marxist, anti-utopia, the double-speak utopia, the crazy genocide that went on over there. And that is like obeying him. But that posits to me, like me and James talked in our very first podcast, it's almost like we're living in a petri dish, and above it is God and above it is Satan. And if you, like the evil one and God, if you will, or your father, as Jesus says, and if you listen to the evil one, he might just get his chunk of the petri dish and turn it into a communist state. And if you listen to the other dude, he'll be like, oh sweet, we'll build a Christian, individualistic, free society where people can live together based on trust. And then the opposite. So it's like there is a dichotomy where you're choosing one or the other. And I think Christ is pretty assertive in that, and being like, yeah, if you choose him, that's what's going to happen. You choose me, this is what's going to happen. It's black and white. And that doesn't strike me as privato boni. That strikes me as Jesus specifically saying the evil is real, man, real. But then it seems like the church framed it as evil is not real or something. That's my problem with this. I sort of don't get this, what Jung's trying to point out here. Like, is that what the church did?
Yeah, maybe. I mean, Christianity's always been a complicated thing because you've got the Gnostics running around who believed in a completely different type of Christianity. And you had multiple sects that were fighting with each other. You had the Council of Nicaea was set down to remedy a particular disagreement between two different types of Christians, and one. And so in many ways, it's the same critique that Nietzsche had, where the Christ that he might have seen, or the Christians he might have seen, might not necessarily have reflected the proper psychologically significant doctrine, right? So just what the privati boni is, in case anyone's not sure, it means the absence of good. So the general Christian conception means that there is God who is good and perfect. And whenever there is an accidental lack of perfection, that's when evil comes in. So I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with Jordan Peterson. So this may be like a little bit of a paradigm shift, because he likes to talk about the idea that evil is its own real phenomenon that you can actually come up against. So perhaps in our corner of the internet, the idea is good and evil. But in the Christian mind, it's like there is perfection, good, and then there is evil, which is excluded. So if you want to, you can like draw yourself a nice circle. Wish I had like a nice whiteboard behind me or something. What the Imago Dei seems to be in Christianity, the image of God, is like a big circle, and it's just Christ in the middle, and he's whole. And then on the outside of the circle, there's like Satan, who's sitting there way smaller and kind of frowning at him. And like that's the image of the world in Christian consciousness, it seems. What Jung's suggesting is it should be way more of a yin and yang idea. So you draw that circle again, divide it down the middle. It should be Christ on one side and Satan on the other. So in many ways, perhaps Jung would be happier if it was more if Jesus had a twin, something like that, whereas like Jesus and Jesus too, and they were both going around Nazareth doing things, but Jesus was casting out demons, and that Satan was carrying out evil things. But I agree with you, Stefan. I do think Jesus talks an awful lot about the evil one. He was accused of being Baal, for example, by some of the scribes and Pharisees, and was like, "You're definitely Baal." So there's the idea that evil demons did exist because you're casting out demons. And then he was like, and that's when he was, what was the actual quote? How can Satan cast out demons? Because a house divided against itself cannot stand. Only God can cast out demons. So there is definitely talk of evil, but it's not talked about as much as good. So maybe there are some lost gospels somewhere that we might find one day, which would be very exciting, where it's the gospel according to Satan, and it's Satan swagging around Jerusalem doing his naughty things to people. That'd be very exciting.
I've thought about this I've articulated it in other streams where it does seem like there's this notion of, and this is the Nietzschean Übermensch, and it comes down to this premise I set up earlier, that we have this throne at the center of your psyche, and there's this usurpation going on where Christ has been knocked off it. So we think anyway. We're running with the narrative that Christ has been knocked off it. And so the question is, how do we get the Übermensch on top of that as soon as possible? But the problem is that the Übermensch is a very Luciferian figure. It's a very anti-Christian figure. Like the Übermensch is this idea of, and E. Michael Jones talks about Christ in this way. He says that it's almost like the idea that you can self-improve and evolve to a higher level. Like you can get past humanity is ridiculous. It's never been achieved and it never will. So you will find your savior in Christ, because Christ is the best psychological way to deal with the human problem. Whereas Nietzsche is asserting that the best realistic way to deal with the human problem is to put all of our efforts together as a society to build something that's better than humanity. Nietzsche's idea is that the reason why we suffer is because we're not strong enough. The stronger you are, the less you suffer. It's actually true to a large extent. Like biologically, if you have like not that much muscle, you're gonna likely feel more pain, especially when you're older, than someone who's actually got a lot of muscle. Muscle means health. That's just fundamentally what it is. It's muscle even improves your hormone profile, it improves your immune system. It's just the gold standard of health. And health is the antidote to suffering. That's like suffering is not being in health. If you're mentally unhealthy, you suffer. If you're mentally healthy, you don't suffer. Or at the very least, when you suffer, you don't feel it. In that sense, it's not suffering, it's just simply pain. It's just simply hardship. It's like, oh fuck, I had a hard day today, but I'm not like in anguish being like, my life, And so Nietzsche is saying that like in order for us to escape this tragedy, which is life, which is constant whirlwind cycle of suffering, we need to evolve, we need to improve the human figure into a stronger version. And then the question becomes, well, how much stronger could we make it? And it's like, well, we could make it the strongest thing we could make it a god. Bang. You're suddenly there in the Luciferian's perspective. The Übermensch is a transcendent of humanity, whereas Christianity asserts that you cannot evolve. You can't, like, you're not going to genetically modify yourself and achieve a better human. It's just bullshit. God made you. It's not going to happen. What you need to do is spiritually purify yourself, which is to make peace with suffering, and that's a really, 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 really hard problem, because there's evidence that people are starting to get the ability to transcend their biology. You can see those people extending their lives and stuff like that, although I'm speaking to a biologist who may have a disagreement, but nonetheless you can see
I'm going to wait for you to say something, then I will absolutely destroy it. So I'm just waiting for you to fall into a pothole. Don't worry, you're fine so far.
there's the elite. You can see, for example, the billionaires who've, like, gathered all our data with Facebook and said, oh, free market, even though the CIA helped me, like, the free market it is. And they've gathered all that stuff, and now they're going on and they're going to, like, take all the young people's blood and inject it into them and start living longer and start, like, they're going to turn into ubermensches essentially. And so are we not a little bit worried that these motherfuckers are going to get access to some biological technology, turn themselves into gods, and just become a ruling class? And is that going to happen? And so is falling for the Christianity thing like utter naive denialism? Like, is that just utter pathetic, like sticking your head in the sand like an ostrich, being like, oh, that's too scary, don't want to compete, I'm like, no way I'm going to compete, should I just bow out of this one, let's just forget about it, and hopefully Christ is real, because it's the only thing I can have to remain hope. Because if I get rid of Christ, then I just have to accept that the Luciferian endeavor is true, and I'm again lagging behind. And so it's setting up that dichotomy, that evil versus good thing, and it's Nietzsche's evil versus good, or good versus bad. What's going on? I don't know. It's so hard to figure out.
Yeah, I think it comes down to a choice. It's like, do you want to be king of the world, or do you want to be king of the gods? And which one's better? Gods meaning the forces in your own head. Because I was just thinking, like, because you bring up working out an awful lot, because that's like a masculine thing to do, we'll say. It's like, okay, imagine you become the biggest man ever. And there have been people, I guess, who, I don't know, Arnold was pretty big in his Mr. Olympia days. It's like, what now? So it's like, okay, now we're going to become incredibly rich. Okay, what now? So what is the end goal in that? Whereas in the more psychological King of the Gods framework, it's, I will return to, like, I came from God. I'm a broken fragment of the image of God, and I'm going to restore myself to return back to him again, return back to the self, back when we were unconscious, I suppose, a unification between the two. There is an end point. Whether or not you'll ever reach it is a different thing, but there is a defined end point. Whereas the more Luciferian one, there is no end point with it. It's just keep going and going and going. Because I was thinking about death and what causes death. The only way to, well, take genetic mutations, for example. Our DNA, if that mutates, then it can go ahead and cause disease like cancer. And the mutation, you can map it on a mathematical level. And there will be, essentially what I'm trying to say is death is mathematically inevitable after X period of time, right? You will eventually die. So the only way to stop that would be, okay, our biology is corrupt, the fallen, broken image of God. Okay, let's try and upload ourselves into a robot. But then if you take the idea that we're in an expanding universe forever, and there are lots of parallel universes, eventually, if the universe keeps expanding and accelerating outwards, there's only a finite amount of energy in the universe. And so that gets spread out, it gets diluted. So eventually we all just die in a big freeze anyway. So what is the end goal? Can you stop death forever? Because they're searching for the same thing. It's a sense of immortality. And it's like, I don't in the Luciferian sense. Like you can do it for a very long period of time, but then maybe there's an element of faith there too. That maybe we will find a way that when this universe dies, we'll just hop into the next one.
That's actually
billion-year-old robot machines. And it's like, okay.
That's fundamentally the only way I can see out of that one. If entropy just keeps going, like entropy is the god of death, he owns this world. Like you say crazy stuff like Satan owns the world, but entropy does own this world. Entropy wins. Like if you look at all models, like the universe doesn't win, entropy wins. Creation loses, life loses, entropy wins in the end, because this is the world of Satan, of the death god. And so what is life then? Is the way out through a spiritual redemption, that you actually get literally saved by some type of benevolent creator we're been taught to believe doesn't exist, that he just like scoops you out and takes you out of the universe and says, good fucking job, that's what you were there for, fucking paid attention, you stopped being a prick and you did it, fair play? Or is it that it's like we have to obey the snake-like energy where we keep on morphing up through higher levels until eventually we create like this Ubermensch that's able to burst through the astral reality and pop out into a new universe and continue the endeavor, or stop time or some shit like that? Like, how far could we go if we kept on evolving? And these questions are unbelievably huge. And it does, like, I think what's interesting for me is that the society we're in now has chosen simply just to worship the death god, being like, let's just burn it all. Whereas, like, it's possible to at least go for the Luciferian thing in a sort of based way of some sort. But then it's like we're not even doing that. But then when you get to this thing, I don't know what's going on. And this is a hard thing for me when they're talking about bravado boni. They're saying, is there evil? Is there good? It's like, so if evil is an absence of good, does that mean what? Lucifer is an absence of good? What's Lucifer doing wrong here? Lucifer's trying to solve a problem without having faith. And so what, you're asserting that it's having faith is the only good? It's just really hard for me. It just fucks in my head, man.
Yeah, I agree with, for what it's worth, I agree with the almighty uncut Carl's critique of the bravado boni. I think it's a silly idea, but the alternative is so unbelievably terrifying, because it means that there is an evil force which it's its own entity. It's like, and it's so foreign to people because you don't really encounter evil very often. I've encountered it a few times in the last year. I've told stories about it, and it's like it hits you when you see in somebody's eyes that they have. I'm going to get people into trouble, that they may or may not have killed people in the past, and you see it, and the way they're looking at you, it's like that's something which would turn you towards Christ. Guarantee it. You could be the most hardcore atheist, and you'd be like, Jesus is my Lord and Savior. Save me now. You know,
this is weird. Yeah, it's because this is my other problem. I like steel manning, so I don't want to just condemn the Catholic Church. Like, they were the strongest institution for the last 2,000 years. Like, you can't just write them off. So what did they, like, why did they think this way? I'm going to have to listen to E. Michael Jones a bit more before we comment on this, because Jung rips into it now a lot with the Gnostics, and that's going to be the next couple of lectures. But I think we should bounce off this for now, because that's a really good setup for what he's about to hack into, where this is where he starts critiquing Christianity. This is where he loses a lot of friends in the Christian movement. This is actually, this particular point that he starts talking about here now is the reason why a lot of Christians don't like Carl Jung, because this is it. And it's a complicated topic. It's a weird one. It gets a bit technical, but the connotations are fucking insane. So, James, any last words? And people, questions, by the way, start writing them now, and so when James is done, we can start ripping into them.
Yeah, it's like, so you want to steel man the Catholic Church, and that's a really, even my dog wants to steel man the Catholic Church, and that's a really good idea to do. But then if you're going to do that, you also have to steel man the Gnostics. And what Christians like to do is sort of say, well, the Gnostics were like a weird cult. They believed in multiple gods. They were strange people. All their texts, we're going to push them aside. And it's like, no, you can't do that. This is what Jung does. He pulls and goes, maybe they have a point. But it's a devastating thing to do, because if you have a religion and a dogmatic framework, if you find that it's missing something, or that it's broken, or that opposing sects have something, then that damages the entire structure. So that's why people don't like to steel man. It's like, what was I missing? Is everything a lie? And it's like, Jung's like, maybe it is, boyos. Maybe your life is a lie. And the kangaroos are coming for you. And that's when he bursts his shirt off by flexing his biceps, and he becomes a kangaroo. He writes all about that in the next lecture, though.
Jung never died. He just became a kangaroo and started making conspiracy documentaries on YouTube. That's pretty much what happened.
Yes, yeah. And he had a hobby, which was just collecting rare pepes. He actually got the greatest rare pepe collection in the entire world.
Of all the various gods. Okay, here we go. Let's chow into questions, because we're hitting on 1 p.m. over here. The poem of Beowulf looks to be newer than the Bible, says Fig Kuok. What does mean? That does mean that Beowulf is the current Chad archetype, or is it something even newer?
Beowulf was what, the 6th century, 7th century, something like that.
Is that English? Is it?
Yes, it's an Anglo-Saxon poem.
Never mind that. Not Chad, no.
It's an Anglo-Saxon poem, and it's a hero story, but it is also Christian, because the demon, I forget the name, begins with G, I think, but whoever the evil person is actually says in one of the first pages is a descendant of Cain. I was like, that's really cool. So it's a piece of mythology within the Christian framework, and it's all about going out, confronting something, killing it to save the world, etc., etc. So all these characters, they do take up Chad status. Lots of movies, for example, characters take up Chad status, and that's absolutely fine. And you end up getting in our collective unconscious together an arena of all these Chads that are out doing their things. But ultimately, what sits at the top of the throne seems to be Christ, because he is the most complete wholeness of all of that together.
The Uber Chad.
Yes, that's exactly what he is. The virgin Chad. The purest Chad.
Yes, yes. I don't know Beowulf too well, my friend. But the way I look at it is that, yes, it is this question of, I've said before, this problem with paganism. And this is the thing. The problem with paganism is that you can't just dismiss it. Our minds are pagan, fundamentally. That doesn't even make sense. Our minds worship gods, but it's more of a question of who sits on the highest throne. So it's almost as if Jesus, for this Aion, was the champion. He was on the highest throne. Before that, it seemed to be some form of, it was like Zeus, you know, he was sitting there. So now we've had Jesus, but underneath Jesus, there's been plenty of shit going on. Like Conor McGregor had the position of a god for a while. He's lost it now, I feel. But when he first came on the scene, he was the warrior archetype for the Irish people for that generation. He sort of became it for the whole world, you know. And it exists there. Like it's that energy is there. It's vibrant. It's relevant, and like Jesus ain't gonna hold everything. But I think the question is that when you really get down to the very big questions that of life, which is what this Aion was about, it's like, what do we do about the future? What's the right way to coordinate super empires? And it seemed to be premised on Jesus. Jesus is the perfect individual. But then when it comes to like warriors and stuff like that, like, all right, Jesus has a warrior soul, but then you can still look to someone like Beowulf and get that inspiration. Dante, you know, like it's all there. And so that's a big assertion though, because there's some people who'll be fundamentalists and be like, I don't like that. But I'm sort of like, this is the kind of direction I go down. But I wonder how that would get digested, because this seems like more of a Gnostic way of looking at things. And I'm not sure if fundamentalists will like, is that idol worship what I'm talking about there? I don't know, man. I don't know.
Maybe. But it's not clear what worshipping other gods means, because you're not going to go and worship. I saw in the chat there, Grendel was the monster in Beowulf. You're not going to go worship it. I really like the idea, but my brain isn't liberal enough to do this properly. Which is, you know, there's advantages to have a conservative type frame. I'm not liberal enough to do this, to see mythology as a landscape of it all, you know. And you know, it's like thou shalt. What's the first commandment? It's like, thou shalt have no other gods before me, right? That doesn't mean there aren't other gods. Fundamentally, it probably does in the Bible. I've just forgotten. I'm being hopeful, where God says, no, I'm the only God. But wouldn't it be interesting if mythology became this poetic landscape where different artists and storytellers would paint on an extra brush, and there are different gods and different characters doing things, but at the top was Jesus Christ. You know, that seems to be what happens in the unconscious.
And that's sort of what I'm getting at when I'm trying to make this big schema that we're living in a petri dish, and you've got Satan and God, the creator, and the entropy force. Like, I think that's a mythology that maps onto Christianity quite well, but you're in the realm of a paganism there, because then you kind of put Jesus as the admin that came down into the petri dish and said, yo guys, this is what's actually going on. So all these other weird gods that are showing up, they're all like, they're cool and all that. You can get inspired by them and all that, but fundamentally I'm the real deal. And this is what I mean. It's like sort of like this Aion was about that drama. This is what this Aion, for whatever Jesus represented psychologically, it took us 2,000 years as a species to sort that out in our collective unconscious. That's what Jung is asserting. It's almost determined that this is going to be your challenge. And so, yeah, Beowulf is newer. Like, there's loads of stuff that's newer. Tyler Durden is newer. It's all energetic and relevant and all that, but does it replace Jesus? I don't know. And this is the big question of our age, is that it seems like Jesus has genuinely been usurped in the last 100 years, and is the Ubermensch going to be the solution to that, or will it turn out that was just a fraud? It was a pretender to the throne, and Jesus is actually going to come back to reassert himself, rebirth the archetype, and change the course of human history.
Dun dun dun.
If so, what happens? In this time of awakening and integration, is it possible to have more than one Jesus figure in an Aion? If so, what happens?
Ish. Sort of.
It's sort of what we were saying in the last one. It is that conception of, where is he gone now? That was from Linwood Gabbery. It's that time.
So there are when we get into the astrology stuff, what you can do is you can map onto the stars specific psychic events. So Jesus Christ in 4 BC, that was a psychological event. But about 1,000 years ago, we started, the aeons get really complicated. Is it two fish swimming in opposite directions? I think it is.
Yeah. That's
from memory, yeah. And then we ended up shifting slightly. And Jung does a really Nostradamus type job at this, where he maps specific psychic events, specific events in history, to changes in position in the stars. So he's like, yeah, the Antichrist idea, that energy came about 1,000 years ago with this particular Saint Joachim, I think. I never liked that name, and then you can map it down. So we do technically have two. We have Christ and we have Antichrist, but psychologically, no. And the reason why would be Christ is a symbol of wholeness. So I think to try and usurp Christ with something that's less whole than Christ isn't going to work in our particular Aion for whatever reason. Christ will always have that more powerful energy to him. You can try, you can consciously do it, but I don't think it will stay there very long. Like our religion, Christianity has sustained itself for 2,000 years. I don't think you could get a cult that would survive for 2,000 years arbitrarily putting one character on the top of the throne. It won't happen. It's a natural, organic process.
And this is the really freaky thing about the Antichrist. This is why this book is astoundingly weird, is that if you're saying that Christ is up here in this story and he's sitting on his throne, Jung is suggesting that an energy appeared in the form of the Antichrist that carried itself through many social movements. And he's currently usurping Christ off the throne. So there is another figure there, but he's not Christ. He's not Jesus. He's going for the Christ position. He wants to be king, and he's having a lot of success. Like, I guarantee you believe in the Antichrist's doctrine of materialism a lot more than you believe in all this shit we're talking about Christianity, because you've been raised in that. And like fundamentally, like it's hard for me and James, even because James is like working in biology and all that. Like we are in this too. And it's the deity of our age is fundamentally, it's almost like we're going through an eclipse at the moment or something. And it's really fucking weird in that sense. And
unification of opposites. I wonder what that means.
Yes, quite. So it is, in this time of awakening, is it possible to have more than one Jesus figure in Aion? Like, I guess it's, if we're like, this is why the paganism thing works. It's almost like, yes, paganism is real. There's often several figures gunning for the throne. Sometimes they're even men, like, but who is on top? That's always a hard, big question. And it seems like Jesus was there for 2,000 years. Now the question is, will he be there for the next 2,000? It's just a huge question. And fuck do we know? Like, we're just boyos who love kangaroos. Jesus. Population, if I'm up, there's a whole point of baby boomers. Yeah, the hedonism. Large questions.
A lot of good chats I've seen, and I've just been monitoring it a little bit. A lot of conversations going on in there.
Yeah, it's tearing. Uber boys,
worshippers.
Yes. The question symbol, people, I look for that specifically. Forgive us, this chest is huge. Uber boys, the church put evil and good outside us, as in heaven and hell elsewhere. Jung thought both was inside of us. That's interesting. Okay, I wonder, I'll have to look into that a bit more. Okay, I think we had a question there. Well, boys, it's crack. They burned the steak. Jung is a... Man, we need to get super chats soon. What the fuck? Abal, the first of the 72. This is from Mr. Castles. Happy Saturday to you, Sammy. And Matchun, how are you? Well, boys. Baal, the first of the 72 in Aris Gothia, the spider with the heads of a demon, a toad and a black cat, king of the east, teacher of invisibility, a very bad juju. I love it, Jordan. That's gas. Okay, here we go. If you become incredibly rich, then you are King Midas, who touched his daughter and she turned into gold. But happiness is not there. Witness the US president. Does anyone think he's happy? That's not a question for us, though.
Yeah, maybe.
Kes Knox says Satan in the Brothers Karamazov is a great depiction. Sad to see I agree with most of his points. See, this is it. Satan is he's not some baddie. Like he's the Luciferian voice on your shoulder that you agree with a lot. And it's usually only one slimmering principle that you challenge it on. Dostoevsky does a brilliant job of articulating Steelman and naughty figures. He's a great grip of evil. It's unbelievable.
We got to get into Dostoevsky at some point. Shout out to the Onion Knight in the old Discord, because I know he's a big Dostoevsky fan, and we talk about Dostoevsky sometimes. It's like every time I talk to you, man, you want to go back to Dostoevsky again, because you can't just throw him away. He's a serious contender in this conversation. Really, really powerful.
Yes. Okay, here we go. It's questions, motherfucker. There's a beast. They're all talking to Skip, James. Fuck.
Skip,
hey,
Skip is the Antichrist in our conversation. He's coming slowly as a deceiver just to usurp us, for God's sake.
Hey, Skip, what are your thoughts on people who deny the existence? Oh, Skip, you tell him, Skip. Do you guys know many of the differences between... Here we go. A question for us. People actually like us now. Kesnock. Hello, Kesnock, our favorite. Do you guys know many of the differences between Christian denominations? I'm considering attending an Eastern Orthodox church tomorrow after visiting it through the week and seeing its beauty.
That's how do I even go about tackling that question? Okay, if you go down the C.S. Lewis route of like mere Christianity, what all the denominations will share is the core beliefs. So it's like Jesus is Son of God, and there's a few
no, there's Arianism. I don't think believes that. Sorry, dude, I shouldn't be speaking the topic.
Oh, Jesus is the Messiah. Jesus sits on the throne. I'll put it like that. Maybe it's an issue with nomenclature, but they all believe the same core stuff. Jung liked the idea that there were lots of different sects because it meant it could keep evolving and surviving over a long period of time, which again, my conservative type brain doesn't like that very much, because it's like, where's the truth? You're just morphing and changing. Honestly, it depends on your personality. If you're a very orderly conservative type, Orthodox stuff's good and Catholic stuff is good. But I've had some of the most fun I have ever had has been in evangelical churches where they begin the mass with a rock band. It's like, what is happening? And they're singing and dancing all over the place. It's like, I'm not liberal enough to do that. I'm an uptight English gentleman. But if that's your thing, go for it. And at the core, like, treat it as like a journey of self-discovery. Pick whichever one looks good to you and going to go and explore it, and then read about the others at the same time. If you're not into speaking in tongues, don't go down the Pentecostal route. It's absolutely fine. I don't blame you. That's for some people. That's their particular thing. But just pick whichever one resonates most with you, and then explore to see what sticks.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about the various Christian sects. I'm learning them through history, actually. Like I'd learn about the Anabaptists, the Protestants, the Catholics. Michael Jones is teaching me a lot about the Catholics. Arianism is a very interesting one. This is the one they used to convert the Norse, and the Gothic scripts, one of the most beautiful writings I've ever seen. Their assertion is that Jesus wasn't a god per se. Like I think that's the right way to say it. They more frame the idea that there's God, and then there's this line, and then there's everything else. So it's almost like that petri dish idea, and God is the only thing outside the petri dish. And Christ was actually, he came from God, but he was still a part of us. He was still part of the creation. So they have that model. There's a load of philosophies, a load of models, a load of notions about how it all works. Arianism's one, Gnosticism's another. The Latter-day Saints is something people are getting me to check out now. That's like transhumanism, spiritual transhumanism. That's a very interesting one. And you're allowed to have multiple wives and all this stuff. And then there's the Catholic one, of course. But then there is this thing now where the Catholic, there's many types, man. It's all interpretations of the book. I don't really know how to hack through it. I think, dude, it's dude or sweet woman or kangaroo, whatever you are. It would be like whatever if you're going to go to a church, you're probably going for that sense of community, that sense of beauty, and to find a spiritual place in your life, like a place where you can go and have that mindset where you're in the presence of something profound, powerful, and big ideas. Like we're sort of do it with this. This sort of is our church in a funny way. Like this is us ripping through this stuff as well. But going to one, regardless of the denomination, is definitely a good idea. Like it's so beautiful for me to just pop into these great buildings around my city, so I wouldn't get too caught up in the denomination. If you want to get baptized into them or some shit like that, that's I'd research it a bit more, but definitely attend them. I don't think anybody's gonna treat you unwelcome. Are you going to do 1,000 sub special featuring Satan? Yes, we'll actually do. We'll actually do an occult ritual from Aleister Crowley's and see can we summon the black demon himself, and we'll have a chat with him. We'll live stream it. Like, look at the boyo.
That'll get you banned very quickly. You're just nutting into a goat live on camera.
I guaranteed, man. I guaranteed if we did that, we'd probably be trending #1. They'd be like, "Fuck yeah, this is the shit. We love this shit." Yeah. Get banned. They'd be like, "This guy is like literally immune from bans." Problem is, you'd never go back. Like, you'd never go back. Nutting into a goat, Jesus.
Yeah, you can't. You're scarred forever with that. Whoever nuts into goats, it's like those people deserve to be oppressed. And of everybody, if you have to pick somebody, it would have to be that, surely.
The goat nutters.
Yeah, it would have to. Who else? Who's a better contender to be oppressed?
Do you ever hear goats scream like people?
Under what circumstances?
They have like a certain like shout where it's like a roaring person. It's hilarious, man. Look it up after this, please. I'm actually going to make sure you do that. And Stefan, did you read up on Collins and Wolf Tone? I didn't check out Wolf Tone, but I checked out Collins. He's a G again. Although I'm not sure. Like, it's Irish history is something I'm gonna have to read a lot more about, because I'm sort of like a bit rattled about all notions of history at this point. I'm not sure if I can trust anything, so I'm gonna have to look through Irish history a bit more and see what was going on, because I wonder if the whole division with the North and all that shit, like, was that really how things had to go down? So yeah, it's all good. It's all good. No, we're good for questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Sess. We're good for questions. I think we're going to wrap this up. Sess knock, by the way, no more butchering, brother. Fuck. What do you gents think of the Feast of Epiphany and the three wise kings in relation to the Christ child from Mr. Castles?
Of course it's from Mr. Castles. Goodness me. I'm actually not going to answer that question because I know exactly what he's trying to do with that. Any mention of the occult, and he's like, did someone say magician?
He has another one down here where he goes, Mr. Castles, somebody said Crowley. The three wise kings in relation to the Christ child. I actually don't know what you're talking about, man. I'll have to check it out. Is this what's going on with this? What is this?
The three wise men who went to go visit Jesus were like magician type characters. Zoroastrianism, I believe, is the correct religion to call them. But the whole symbolism of gold, frankincense, and myrrh is just like, it's a line that's written in the gospel, but it's actually like a deep occult type history behind it.
Yes.
So
this is it. Like, the occult is tied with Luciferianism, and if you want to steel man the occult, I know a lot of people have naughty things to say about the occult now, but like, what is the occult? It is actually just a denomination separate from the Catholic Church. And so, was this denomination an attempt to bring this Luciferian energy into the world, and was Catholicism holding us back? Like, these are big questions. They're fucking tough to get through. I don't know what to make of them at all. So maybe there are coded in this, like, you know, maybe all these stories, as we said, interpreting these stories properly, maybe all these gospel stories do have an occult meaning, a hidden meaning that the Catholic Church has beat out of us and canonized. Like, the Catholic Church said, this is the Bible, this is our canon. We're not going to let anybody else have any other perspective. And was the occult then simply this attempt to strip that bullshit out and strip away from that singular perspective and try to create a new perspective? Like, maybe that's a good steel man of that, but that's a scary steel man, because then, I don't know, instincts go off and you're like, oh God, the Catholic Church sounds dodgy. Anyway, Cessnock, I could help but laugh at speaking in tongues. For an entrance into this type of belief, they have to take it very serious for me to be able to take it serious. Yes, quite. Yeah,
that's completely and utterly fair enough. The denominations might be a personality split. I don't know what to make of them. A dude did talk in tongues to me and held my hand, and it was very moving to me. But he did say to me beforehand, he's like, if you feel the urge to speak in tongues, just do it, let it all out. And I'm like, I'm not letting anything out. No way, dude. Like, I don't dance. I don't sing unless it's by myself. I'm not speaking in tongues in the middle of public. It's silly boys.
Yeah, dude. You're the absolute stereotype of what people make fun of stuck-up Victorian Catholic Englishmen for.
Probably, yeah. Actually. I'll Yeah, I'll keep it at that for now. Sweet Lord.
All right, people, let's wrap it up. As Abis says, in the 1,000 subs, we want you to feature a goat, Satan, and the Chad Alpha Kangaroo. All right, people, thank you very much. Thanks for all that. That was good. That was a lovely stream. It's lovely to hear from you all. I hope all is well. Stay strong, stay juicy, stay happy, and stay Chad like the kangaroos. James.
Yes, thank you, people. Appreciate you all. Make sure your logos remains on top form and no more degeneracy, please.
Yes.
Or else boy Michael Jones will be very upset with you.
Most certainly. Right. Bye-bye, people. Thank you very much. See you later. Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.